Hello guys, this is Tech here and I'm back with another PC build. This was gonna be the ultimate value for money build or the ultimate bang for the buck build. So this is gonna be targeted at extracting the most amount of performance for the money that you're paying. So it's gonna cost £800, which is sort of the mid-range to upper mid-range class or price range for the build. So in this sort of build I wanted to give you the most performance for the amount of money you're spending, and I think I've managed to do that in this build. It's a great build for 1440p gaming. Should have no problem having a great experience in 1440p, high settings and good frame rates as well. So with this build I should have no problem, and it's £800, which is, it's not the most affordable, but it's the price range where you're gonna get the most for your money. It's worth spending the money in order to get some quality components. So for the first component in this build I have the Intel Xeon E3 1230V3. So this is a Xeon processor, but it's about £70 cheaper than the i7 equivalent, which is the i7 4790K. So this Xeon processor is based around the same architecture. It's on the Razihel 22 nanometer process, and it's pretty much going to perform exactly the same as the i7 4770K and 4790K, but the only difference is the overclocking department. You won't be able to overclock it. It's got a 3.3 GHz core clock and a boost clock of 3.7 GHz, which should be more than enough, especially in gaming. Since this is a gaming oriented PC build, this is not going to affect any of it, any of the performance of gaming performance, as that's going to be handled by the GPU. And even in some CPU intensive games you shouldn't see much of a difference, and this is just overall very good value for money. CPU, you don't get any integrated graphics card, so that's where you save the money. If you're getting a discrete GPU, you don't need it. This is a quad core processor with hyperthread, for making it having 8 thread being recognized by the system, and only 80 watts firmware design. So the TDP is 80 watts, pretty lower than the i7 4790K I think, or about the same. And it's on the EVGA 1150 motherboard, so it can be supported by Z97 boards or the H97 and the B85 chipset as well, all supported. And it's just an overall very good value for money processor at the price point at only £205. It's a very good value for money, and it's gonna give the i7 alternative like the 4790K a run for its money, so I would recommend it for this build. Next we have the cooler, and you could stick with the stock cooler for this build as the Xeon coolers are a bit beefier than the consumer grade ones. They are still noisy. If your noise is a big concern for you, then in this build I've included the Cooler Master Hyper TX3 Evo. So this is a smaller 92mm fan design, so smaller than the Hyper 212 Evo, but in terms of performance it shouldn't have that much of a difference. It should be more than enough to cool the CPU, as you won't be overclocking it, and much better than the stock CPU cooler. It only comes in at £16, which I think you can afford to spend that extra 16 quid to get a very quiet and very efficient CPU cooler like the Cooler Master Hyper TX3 Evo. Next we have the motherboard, and for this I chose the Gigabyte GA-B85-HD3. so this is a B85 chipset which is supported by a Xeon processor. It comes in at £76. It's a pretty good deal. It's not the cheapest one you can get. You get cheaper ones, but what I look for in a motherboard is to have VRM heatsinks, as that is very important for power management and power delivery to the CPU, as those heatsinks help cool down the VRMs, because if they overheat then your processor might become unstable. Even the processor we can't overclock, it's still very good. It's good in general to just choose a motherboard with heatsinks if in case you want to upgrade the CPU later to actual i7 4790K, which I wouldn't recommend. But if you wanted to do that then and wanted to get that overclocking ability, then this motherboard should be able to support it as an okay overclock. It is part of the Gigabyte Ultra Durable series, which implements very high quality components. It is on the LG 1150 motherboard, so it does support a CPU. I've got 4 DIMM slots, which is what I look forward as well, and it's a 480X board, and with the 4 DIMM slots you have an expandability on RAM in case you want to go for maximum 32 gigabytes, which in any gaming PC it's not very necessary. There is no SLI support, but there is crossfire support which you could utilize in the future, as I've used an AMD graphics card for this build. And there is onboard USB 3.0 headers, which is very important, as most new cases do feature your USB 3.0 ports on them, which you won't be able to connect to your motherboard motherboard and use if your motherboard doesn't support onboard USB 3.0. This is it for the motherboard. It's a solid motherboard from Gigabyte. They're a very respectable manufacturer of motherboards, and I would recommend it for this build. Next is the RAM, and for this I went with the cheapest 16GB kit I could find. 16GB at the moment, it's a very good price. It's only £50 for this DDR3 1600MHz kit. It's the Patriot Viper 3, so it's a very nice looking RAM. 1600MHz, more than enough for any gaming performance, and it's 2 8GB sticks, so you get 16GB. I would still recommend 8GB, but at the moment the price for 16GB is so good that I would just go with 16GB, and in the future games might require more RAM to be using, as games are starting to require 8GB as a minimum, and if you want to be above the minimum then I'd go with 16GB, but 8GB is just fine as well. I'm using 8GB in my system and I've never had a problem with it, so it's up to you. But just the value for DDR3 RAM at the moment is so good that I'll just go with 16GB, and then you don't have to worry about it for the next few years. Next is the storage, and for this I chose the OCZ Trion 10 240GB SSD. So this is a very inexpensive SSD, only £46 for 240GB, which is quite a lot of storage. It's from OCZ. It's a well-known company for solid state drives. 240GB should be more than enough to store your operating system or your applications, and maybe a few games that have long loading times, which this will improve with pretty decent read and write speeds. Next we have more storage, and as SSD 240GB might not be enough for everything like your media library, and in most builds I would suggest a mass storage hard drive, as the price for the storage you get is still very good with hard drives, because you can get this Western Digital Caviar Blue 1TB hard drive for £39, which is cheaper than the SSD, and you get 1TB of storage you can use as a mass storage device for all your media, movies, all your libraries, and your extended Steam library, as most people won't be able to fit all of their Steam library on just a 240GB SSD. So this is where you can have the rest of your library that doesn't fit on the SSD. And WD is just a very reliable manufacturer of hard drives, so the hard drives they make are very reliable, and I would recommend it for any build. I'm using it in my system on WD Green, which has run for 5 years straight without any problems, so I can recommend their drives. Next we have the XFX Radeon R9 390 graphics card. So this is the 8GB graphics card, which is quite low VRAM. I would recommend the R9 390 over the GTX 970 just solely on the VRAM, 8GB of VRAM, as games are starting to require more and more VRAM, and it's really gonna start showing with the GTX 970 in the future games. But with the 390 you'll be set for the next few years at playing 1440p gaming at like high settings and still get good frame rates in the 60 FPS range. But more intensive games, as games are getting more intensive these days, we might need to turn down some settings, but this should have no problem playing them. And if you're playing at 1080p, then you'll be set for the next couple of years, no matter how intensive the game gets. But at the moment it's £258, and which is a very good price. I mean, it's £260, sorry, which is a very good price, and I would suggest going with this instead of the GTX 970. It's a bit cheaper than the 970 depending on what version you get. As I said, you have that massive VRAM, and it's just overall a very good card for the money, and I would suggest it for this build. Next we have the case, and for this I chose the NZXT S340, which I've recommended in a number of my previous builds, as it's a very solid case from NZXT. I'm actually using it in my system, so I do own the NZXT S340, so I can confirm that it's a very good case with good cable management solution. Overall got a lot of space to work with. It is a mid tower, so there's a limited amount of space, but good enough for any PC and any ATX PC build. A moist card, you can fit in any card pretty much. Not so much with the dual cards, you might be a bit tight for space when you go into Crossfire, but it's overall a solid case with good airflow, good cable management, a PSU shroud that hides all the cables, so you don't see any of the cables. Just looks clean with a nice big side window which you can show off all your components, and it's just overall a very solid case from NZXT. But last and not least, we have the power supply, and for this I chose the EVGA 600B. This is a 600 watt 80 plus bronze certified power supply from EVGA, which is my most favorite supply of power supplies. At the moment, they supply some of the best PSUs around. 600B is not an exception. It's 8 plus bronze certified. 600 watts going to be more than enough to power any of our components, all of our components as well. And you should have no problem even if you put in a more high-end graphics card or change the system. This should last you for a while. And this is an overall very good solid power supply. It's gonna be quiet, run cool, and should have no problem with it. It's not modular, which is like the only problem with this power supply, but the case does have the PSU shroud, so it's gonna hide all the cables and you won't be able to see them, which is a plus, and I would recommend it for this build. But if you are going to go for a future Crossfire, or if you're planning to go to Crossfire in the future, then you might want to look to like an 850 watt to support that, or a 750 watt might be just enough as well. Total price came to £806, which is slightly above the budget, but the prices did change as I was making this video, so yeah, they might go down by the time you see this video. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like, maybe subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.